I have carried a heavy secret in my heart for many years. It is a story of love, betrayal, and regret that I feel I must finally share. If there's one thing life has taught me, it is that the weight of remorse only grows heavier with time. My name isn't important. What matters is what I did and how it changed everything. I want to tell you about the mistake I made decades ago, one that haunts me every day, one that taught me the true meaning of loyalty, sacrifice, and forgiveness. I met my husband, James, in 1989, and within a year we were married. He was a soft-spoken soldier with warm brown eyes and a steady presence that made me feel safe. On our wedding day, his voice trembled with emotion as he said, "I do." We truly believed our love could conquer any challenge back then. In those early days, life was all laughter, hopeful plans, and stolen kisses. We dreamed of growing old side by side, never imagining how soon life would test us. But reality tested us in ways we never imagined. Not long after our marriage, James was deployed overseas to serve our country. I was proud of him, but I also felt gnawing anxiety and loneliness. Months stretched into years of him being away on missions. He missed birthdays and anniversaries. We learned to celebrate apart, with me often making a wish alone, over a single candle. We had no children to fill the lonely hours, which made his absence cut even deeper. Every night, I sat in our quiet house and ached for his presence. In the beginning, we wrote letters and managed occasional phone calls. His words from far away kept me going. He would apologize for missing our life and promise to make it up to me when he returned. I treasured those letters, reading them over and over. Sometimes I'd curl up at night, wearing one of his old shirts, just to feel closer to him, and I would whisper prayers for his safety. I tried to stay strong. I got a job as a receptionist at a local clinic to fill my days. But every time I returned to an empty home, the silence was suffocating. It was at the clinic that I met Michael, a volunteer. He was around my age and had a gentle, friendly manner that could momentarily ease my loneliness. We often chatted during breaks, two lonely souls sharing a bit of warmth. Over time, I found myself confiding in Michael about my worries. He listened with such compassion when I spoke of my fears for James or how hollow the house felt. In hindsight, I see that we were growing too close, but at the time I was just grateful for the comfort of a friend. One rainy evening after we closed up the clinic, Michael and I were the last to leave. We stood under the awning as the rain poured down in sheets. All the emotions I'd been holding in suddenly overwhelmed me. I broke down sobbing, my shoulders shaking as years of loneliness and fear poured out of me. Through my tears, I confessed how afraid I was that James might never come home, how lonely I felt. Michael's face filled with sympathy. He wrapped his arms around me in a warm embrace, trying to console me. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. In that moment, the warmth and human contact felt like a lifeline. I clung to him, crying into his chest. He stroked my hair and murmured that I wasn't alone, that it was going to be okay. Then, before I realized it, his lips were on mine and I was kissing him back. It was a gentle, desperate kiss born of sorrow and longing. The world seemed to stop around us as the rain drummed on. And in the very next instant, a wave of guilt and horror crashed over me. I pushed Michael away, my heart pounding. "I can't. I'm married," I gasped, stepping back and wiping my tears with trembling hands. Reality set in immediately. What had I done? Michael looked as though he might cry himself. "I'm sorry," he whispered. We stood there, rain soaking us, both in shock at what had just happened. Without another word, I turned and ran to my car. The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, sobbing so hard I could barely see the road. How could I have betrayed the man who was risking his life for me? When I got home, I collapsed onto our bed, which still carried James's scent on the pillows, and I cried until I had no tears left. The next morning, guilt weighed on me like a stone. I resolved that what happened with Michael would never, ever happen again. It was a terrible mistake, born of weakness and loneliness. I was determined to cut off any personal contact with Michael and refocus on being the loyal wife James deserved. I even drafted a resignation letter to remove myself from temptation entirely. Deep down, I knew I had to tell James the truth when he came home. He deserved honesty. But the thought of it terrified me. I kept rehearsing how I would confess, though every scenario in my mind ended with him despising me. Before I could find the right moment or the courage to tell him, fate intervened. Only a week later, I got word that James was coming home on leave earlier than expected. After a particularly dangerous tour, his commanders were granting him a month at home. I was overjoyed and paralyzed with fear. I had longed for his return, yet now I carried this awful secret. I decided I would tell him everything, but only after he had a chance to rest and we had a few peaceful days together. When James stepped out of the taxi in front of our house, I ran to him and threw my arms around him. He dropped his duffel bag and lifted me into a tight hug. I laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed to feel him against me again. For the first few days of his leave, we fell back into our loving routines as if nothing had changed. We cooked meals together, took walks in the crisp autumn air, and curled up on the couch, watching our favorite old movies. On the surface, it was as though all those lonely nights apart had never happened. But underneath, I was a wreck. The guilt of what I had done gnawed at me constantly. I would lie awake at night watching him sleep, wondering how I could ever find the words to tell him. One evening, about a week into his leave, everything unraveled. I was in the kitchen washing dishes while James stepped outside to grab something from the car. There was a sudden knock at the front door. My stomach lurched. I was not expecting anyone. I dried my hands and opened the door to find Michael standing on our porch, looking anxious and rain-drenched. "Michael?" I whispered in disbelief, my heart leaping into my throat. He had never come to my home before. I slipped outside onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind me. My mind was racing. Michael stammered that he needed to talk to me, that I'd been avoiding him at the clinic and he wanted to apologize, to make sure I was all right. I could see the regret in his eyes, but this was absolutely the worst time and place for this conversation. "You need to leave," I hissed under my breath, panic making my voice shake. At that exact moment, the front door swung open. James had returned from the car, confused as to why I had closed it. He looked from me to Michael standing on our porch, and I saw the warm contentment he'd worn all week drain from his face. "What's going on?" he asked quietly, an unfamiliar edge in his voice. I felt the blood drain from my own face. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. I knew how incriminating this looked. Michael started to speak, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I just needed to discuss something with Alice from work." He was trying to lie for me, but his tone was panicked and unconvincing. James stepped forward, positioning himself between Michael and me. He was still in civilian clothes, but I saw the soldier in him surface. The steely focus, the barely restrained intensity. "At our home, at night?" he asked in a low, dangerous voice. His eyes were fixed on me now, and they were full of hurt and suspicion. I had never seen that look directed at me. My voice finally came back in a broken rush. "James, I can explain," I began, reaching out toward him. He took a small step back, and I swear I could almost hear his heart breaking. Everything was collapsing around us. Michael, looking utterly guilt-ridden, took this as his cue to leave. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, before quickly walking off into the night. James stared at me, jaw clenched tight. The door closed behind Michael, leaving just the two of us in a tense silence. "How long?" James demanded softly after a moment, his voice strained. My whole body was shaking. It only happened once," I managed to whisper. "I made a terrible mistake." "I'm so sorry, James." Tears blurred my vision as I spoke. He closed his eyes as if my words had struck him like a physical blow. When he opened them again, they were filled with tears of his own. "I trusted you," he said hoarsely, pain cracking through his voice. "Every day I was out there, I fought to stay alive to come home to you. You were my light, the reason I kept going." A tear rolled down his cheek, and he wiped it away angrily. Seeing that single tear on his face, knowing I had caused it, broke something inside me. I fell to my knees on the living room floor, sobbing. "Please, please forgive me," I begged, reaching for his hand. He pulled away, and I could only bow my head, my hands clasped together as if in prayer. "I love you so much," I cried. "I never stopped loving you. I was lonely and scared, and I messed up. I have no excuse. I'm so sorry." My words dissolved into cries. James stood there, breathing hard, towering above me. For a brief second, I thought he might reach down to touch me, perhaps brush my hair like he always used to, but he didn't. He just shook his head, a look of utter devastation on his face. I can't do this," he murmured, voice breaking. "I can't even look at you right now, Alice." His tone was ice and fire at the same time, anger and hurt coiled together. He turned and walked down the hall. I scrambled up and followed, heart pounding with dread. He went into our bedroom and emerged moments later with his duffel bag. He was leaving. I stood in front of the door, desperate, tears streaming down my cheeks. "James, please," I cried. "Don't go like this. Yell at me, punish me, I don't care. Just please don't walk away." I was almost incoherent, shaking from head to toe. His eyes met mine for a moment, and I saw a flash of anguish there. "I need time," he said quietly. There was a terrifying emptiness in his voice. "I can't be here right now." I hesitated, then stepped aside from the door, realizing I had no right to stop him. He opened it and paused briefly. I can't," he whispered, voice cracking. Then he walked out into the night, closing the door behind him with a final thud that seemed to shake the walls. The moment he left, a wail escaped my throat. I crumpled onto the floor and stayed there for I don't know how long, sobbing until I was physically exhausted. That night was the darkest of my life. I clutched our wedding photo to my chest, staring at our once happy faces through a blur of tears, unable to fathom how I had destroyed our happiness. I truly believed I had lost everything. In the days that followed, I was a wreck. James cut off all contact with me. I learned he even returned to his unit early, preferring to face danger again rather than face me. News of my betrayal spread quickly in our small community, and I found myself isolated, drowning in shame. I quit my job at the clinic and rarely left the house. Every corner of our home reminded me of the man I had driven away. I wrote dozens of letters to James, pouring my apologies and love onto paper, but I couldn't gather the courage to send any of them. Not a single call or message came from him. Weeks turned into months. I woke up each day and survived somehow, hoping for a miracle that he might give me another chance, while fearing I didn't deserve one. 6 months later, on a cold autumn evening, a knock sounded at my door. My heart lurched into my throat. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened it, 2 uniformed army officers stood there. My blood ran cold. They gently informed me that James had been badly injured by an IED explosion. He was in critical condition at a hospital in Germany, but alive. "He's been asking for you," one added softly. I was already grabbing my coat with shaking hands before they finished explaining. Within hours, I was on a military flight, racing across the ocean to reach my husband. On that long journey, I sat rigid in my seat, fingers digging into the armrests as I imagined the worst. I prayed desperately with every fiber of my being. If he survived, I vowed, I would spend the rest of my life making it up to him. I arrived at the hospital in the dead of night. I'll never forget the image of him in the ICU. James lay pale and unconscious, tubes and wires everywhere, machines beeping softly. My strong, brave husband looked so fragile. The doctors gave me a guarded update. His condition was touch and go. Seeing him like that nearly broke me. But he was alive, and he needed me. I took his hand gently and sat beside him. "I'm here, my love," I whispered, my tears falling freely. "I'm here." I kept vigil at his bedside around the clock. I talked to him constantly, unsure if he could hear me, but hoping my voice somehow reached him. I told him I loved him over and over, that I was so sorry and that he needed to fight, to live, so I could spend every day making this up to him. I begged for his forgiveness, even if he couldn't respond. At one point, as I was apologizing through tears, I felt a faint squeeze of my hand, my breath caught. It might have been a reflex, but I held onto that tiny sign. "Hang on," I urged him, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. "Please, hang on." Finally, after several agonizing days, James opened his eyes. I was right there, leaning over him. His gaze was glassy with medication and confusion, but he focused on me. "Alice?" he rasped, barely audible. A sob of relief burst from my chest. "I'm here," I replied, smoothing his hair back gently. Tears of gratitude blurred my vision. His own eyes filled with tears. In a broken whisper, he said, "I thought I'd never see you again." My heart shattered at his words. I carefully cradled his face in my hands and told him through my tears, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here and I'm yours, for as long as you want me." We wept together quietly in that sterile hospital room, the hurt and the relief washing over us. To my eternal gratitude, James allowed me to stay by his side throughout his recovery. When he was stable enough to travel, I accompanied him back home. There was a long road ahead to heal his physical wounds, and perhaps a longer road to heal the wounds between us. Back home, I devoted myself to caring for him, day and night. At first, there was a polite distance between us, cautious words, avoiding the deeper pain. But with each passing week, that wall began to crumble. He would wince in pain and let me help him, or I would catch him watching me with a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there since before everything went wrong. Slowly, compassion and familiarity returned. We found little ways to be close again, sitting together on the porch in silence, our shoulders just barely touching, or him allowing me to hold his hand during a particularly bad pain spell. One warm spring night, we sat on our porch under a blanket of stars, much like we used to. The crickets chirped in the darkness between us. Finally, James turned to me and, in a voice barely above a whisper, asked,
"Why?"
That was all he said, but I knew exactly what he meant. My throat tightened. I had been waiting for this moment, dreading it and needing it. I took a shaky breath and answered him honestly. I told him I had been lonely, depressed, and terrified of losing him, that I had felt abandoned, though I knew he was doing his duty, and that I was weak and foolish and fell apart when I should have been strong. It was never because I didn't love you, I added, my voice trembling. I've always loved you so much. I was just broken. And I am so, so sorry." James closed his eyes and a tear escaped down his cheek. "I never realized how much pain you were in back here," he said softly. There was regret in his voice. I shook my head, fresh tears falling. "You have nothing to apologize for," I whispered. "It was my failing, not yours." He opened his arms then, and I moved into his embrace. He held me for the first time in what felt like ages, and I felt him trembling. "I'm so tired of being angry," he admitted, voice raw. "I miss you." My heart swelled and broke at the same time. We clung to each other under the starlight, both of us crying quietly for all that had been lost and what might yet be saved. In that tearful embrace, I heard him whisper, "I forgive you." I nearly collapsed in his arms, a wail of relief escaping my lips. I held him as tight as I dared, feeling years of guilt start to melt away.
Thank you, I wept over and over.
He just stroked my hair and held me, crying softly with me. Forgiveness had finally found us on that porch beneath the silent stars. Rebuilding our marriage after that was not easy. There were still hurt feelings and difficult conversations in the months and years that followed. But from that night on, we faced them together. Trust, once broken, takes time to heal. But day by day, we rediscovered it.
We learned to be open about our fears and feelings, no more suffering in silence.
Bit by bit, joy filtered back into our days. We were given a second chance, and we tried to make the most of it. In time, we found a new happiness. James left active duty and took a job that kept him close to home. We settled into a peaceful life, grateful for every moment together. We grew older side by side, always aware of how close we had come to losing it all. The scar of what happened remained, but it served as a reminder of how precious our love truly was.
2 years ago, I lost James.
One cold morning, he suffered a sudden heart attack and was gone in an instant. I did not even get to say goodbye. The grief was immense, but I was comforted by the years we had shared, a gift we might have never gotten if not for forgiveness. In his final days, he would often hold my hand and say,
"I'm glad you're here."
I think, in his own way, he wanted me to know that we had made it, that we were okay again. Now I sit alone under those same stars, talking to his memory. I tell him about my day, about how much I miss him. Sometimes I even apologize to him again in whispered prayers, though I know he'd shake his head and tell me I've long since been forgiven. I can almost hear his voice in the rustling night breeze, reassuring me, telling me that he loves me still. I decided to share this story because I learned some hard lessons about love and regret. Cherish the people you love and communicate openly with them. If you feel lonely or afraid, don't hide it and don't seek comfort in the wrong place like I did. Talk to your loved ones and face your hardships together. I nearly destroyed my marriage because I was too scared and proud to admit how much I was struggling. And if you have been betrayed, know that forgiveness, while difficult and never guaranteed, can sometimes mend what's broken. It isn't easy, and it isn't for everyone. But I was blessed that James found it in his heart to forgive me. That forgiveness healed us both and gave us many more years of happiness that we might otherwise have lost. Not everyone gets that chance. So hold on tight to the people you love, and don't let pride, fear, or anger keep you apart. Thank you for listening. I truly hope you never make the mistakes I did, but if you do, I hope you find the courage to face them, and that you too are met with understanding and love in return. In the end, I have learned that true love, if you are lucky enough to find it, can endure even the gravest of mistakes, given the chance.